Employers reveal why Gen Z is the hardest generation to work with. According to a recent survey of 1,300 managers, 3 out of 4 agree that Gen Z is harder to work with than other generations. So much so that 65% of employers said they have to fire them more often.
Generation Z, commonly referred to as Gen Z, are individuals born between 1997 and 2012. This generation follows millennials and has been facing backlash by both employers and the press for being the lazy generation, who are useless in the workplace with no desire to climb the corporate ladder. I want to learn just how true these claims are, why Gen Z are against traditional work culture, and how employers themselves have been directly impacted by Gen Z in the workplace.
Are you a millennial or are you a Gen Z?
So I am sort of a younger millennial. So I would say I'm sort of on the cusp, but the kids on TikTok vilified me for that. They were like, you are not on the cusp, you're a millennial. So I'm gonna do a test to figure this out. I need conclusive answers. Where better to go than BuzzFeed? When you hear the name JoJo, who do you think of? Yeah, JoJo singular, not JoJo Siwa. Which jeans do you prefer, skinny or loose? I mean, in my older age, I'm gonna say loose just because it's more forgiving. Was your first cell phone a flip phone? It absolutely was, yes. And finally, which hair parting do you prefer, middle part or side part? I mean, I did rock a side part in 2009, but I much prefer middle now. Millennial, of course, of course. You cherish experiences and travelling over material items. As you've gotten older, your self-confidence has grown, as well as your ambition. You have big dreams for yourself, and you don't mind working hard to make them come true. So true, BuzzFeed.
Being a millennial, I'm part of the generation born between 1981 and 1996. Growing up in that generation, I was introduced to traditional 9-to-5 work culture, and climbing the corporate ladder was something that was both encouraged and expected.
The kind of overarching theme of millennials, I feel like, for us it was very trendy to be like hustle, work hard, make money, you know, that was like the big thing.
But the media paints a very different picture when it comes to Gen Z.
Hiring Generation Z is a nightmare. Nightmare is how James McNeil describes his experience working with members of Generation Z. Many young workers are barely able to get through an interview, are unwilling to pick up the phone, and have even ghosted their new companies completely on the first day of their jobs, according to exasperated employers. McNeil, 38, had been in charge of a sales team of an organisation collecting music royalties from businesses, and often he received job applications from 20-somethings to join the company. We'd book interviews, but people wouldn't turn up, or they'd turn up late, or they'd turn up and were wildly unprepared. They didn't know anything about what they were doing, what they were there for. Others were afraid of getting on the phone and thought that everything should be done via email or text.
Where do you stand with that personally?
I get it. Like nowadays it is so much easier to just fire off a text, fire off an email, but I think in a professional setting you have to be ready to get on the phone. If you're applying for a job that's a sales job that means you're going to have to speak to people on the phone, don't apply for the job if you're not willing to do what's required of you. It just doesn't really add up. They wouldn't want to pick up the phone and speak to somebody because they didn't like that one-to-one conversation or confrontation sometimes. They're good with technology, but not good with life skills. They don't seem to be that asked about anybody else but their own personal space and experience and what they need and want. There doesn't seem to be any bigger picture thinking. McNeil found Gen Z workers repeatedly asking for flexible working and says they had an automatic assumption that they could work from home. He describes it as a consistent battle of trying to get people into the office.
Having read this article, I wanted to chat directly with James to learn more about his experiences with Gen Z as an employer.
So let's just get straight into it. If you want to give us a bit of background on your sort of professional background, what is it you do for work?
So now I run my own company. Yeah, that's my current, but my past has always been kind of sales, accounts, that kind of thing. Working with a lot of Gen Z. What
have your experiences been so far working with Gen Z employees?
If we want to talk about the positives first, before we go into the negatives, I think from my experience, there's a lot of innovation out there. There's a lot of great ideas. They are, when it comes to technology, they are miles ahead of their seniors. Some of the not so good stuff, I would say. especially when we talk about kind of expectations in the workplace. For me, growing up, there was an expectation of kind of over delivering, turning up early, dressing smartly, respecting your elders, respecting your seniors, doing all these sorts of things, kind of not taking anything for granted. I think that behavioural trait has been squashed out of younger people now. The expectations are a lot higher, but they're willing to deliver a lot less for those expectations. There's an assumption that people can work remotely or work from home or work from the beach.
How do you feel about working from home?
I mean, I work for myself now. I run my own business, and I'm in the office 4.5 days a week. So I work from home on a Tuesday afternoon because I have to pick my daughter up from school. It's not a right, it's a privilege, and you have to earn that privilege.
How would one go about earning that privilege then? What does that look like to you?
So demonstrating that you can do the role, demonstrating that you can be trusted to deliver the same amount of output that you would do if you were in the office. There's no good having people work from home if their output drops to 70% and you have to check up on them all the time. It's counterproductive. So, have
you had any experiences with Gen Z working from home and maybe kind of abusing that privilege?
Yeah, I had a guy that thought it was a good idea to record himself going to the laundrettes at about 3:00 on a Friday afternoon to his colleagues and saying, "I'm just nipping down to the laundrettes. I've got to drop some stuff off working from home today." And that came back to me. So just that as an example, just the bravery or the kind of the lack of care to just do that and think I can get away with it and it's not a big deal is just staggering, really, to think that you can get away with that.
That definitely wasn't as part of his lunch break or anything like that. It couldn't be.
No, definitely not. No, that was just I'll wiggle my mouse, I'll run to the laundrette, I'll be back in half an hour and nobody will notice kind of.
But how do you know that? Had he already taken a lunch break earlier in the day, or because you never know, he might have just been taking a late lunch.
Might have been, but no, I'm absolutely certain it was not his lunch break. He didn't last much longer with us, actually, that particular gentleman. So
I've read a lot of other articles about the same sort of topic, and a lot of them say it's just the general sort of picture that they're painting, saying that Gen Z are lazy. So yeah, but how far would you agree with that statement, I suppose?
Because of how they've been brought up alongside technology, they look to technology to speed things up or to find better ways or quicker ways of doing things. Some people may see that as being lazy or cutting corners. There is probably some truth to that, but there is also some benefit to that as well, because, if we're innovating, if we're rewriting the way we do things, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And
in terms of the interviewing as well, so you mentioned as well about people not being dressed properly. Is that something you found?
Yeah, I mean, the particular employer did have quite a relaxed dress code anyway for people that worked in the organisation. Shirt and ties and suits and that kind of thing were not part of the expectation. However, they wouldn't have known that, and you would always turn up to an interview, trying to overachieve a little bit. If they say turn up in jeans and a t-shirt, well, don't turn up in a suit and then you stand out, don't you? I had one girl that turned up 15 minutes late and she blamed the lack of parking. Well, in my day, I would be 30 minutes early for an interview so that if there was no parking or trouble, I would still be 10 minutes early. But the way she saw it was I'll just turn up bang on time, and then if there's no parking, I'll be late, and that's their fault. It's just a different mindset. It's a lack of understanding, and I don't think individuals are necessarily to blame for that. I think education fails them in that sense because they don't prepare people for that kind of real life experience and expectation that you get in the workplace that differs from education.
Yeah, so I was going to ask actually, what do you think it is? What is the reason? Where have they developed this mindset from?
I wouldn't want to just immediately point my finger at social media, but I think that does certainly what they might see online is not the real world in 99.9% of circumstance. In any industry where people make a lot of money and it's deemed to be easy money, there are always going to be people that want to follow that system and replicate the same thing. You could look at footballers and say everybody wants to be a footballer because it's easy money, they love football, but the reality is that 0.001% actually get anywhere near that kind of level. It's the same with social media. So I think people do go down that route. I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, But I think, like, if you want to try and be a professional footballer, you have to be realistic and accept that you're probably not going to make it, and therefore you need to have something to fall back on.
Speaking to James, it's clear his views are somewhat traditional, and although I don't agree with all the points he raised, I can relate to a lot of what James was talking about, having been brought up and encouraged to follow traditional work culture. It's the next day, and I'm heading to Manchester to try and learn more about Gen Z. I've arranged a chat with 25-year-old Dominique, who's just recently ditched the 9-to-5 to start her own business. I want to understand why Dominique has chosen to give up her 9-to-5, her thoughts on work culture, and why she feels a majority of her generation are against climbing the corporate ladder.
So what was the 9-to-5 job? Was it like working in an office?
Yeah, so it was working in an office, it was working on a sales floor, so it's basically like a call centre. I remember telling my sister that I'd got the job, and she tried to be all happy for me and everything, but I think she knew that it wasn't it.
It wasn't your story.
No, it wasn't. That wasn't going to be
It wasn't
my
the
story.
path for you.
No.
Right.
The environment in itself, and this is why I have a problem with the whole concept of, you need to go and get a 9-to-5, you need to do this, because a lot of these environments, they're not set up for people to actually flourish. They're set up for people, especially these sorts of sales jobs, they're set up for people to be dependent on it and to be so mentally drained and withdrawn that you literally have no energy to focus on anything else. Would you prefer to be using your creativity to earn a living, or being stuck in an office, basically pouring all your energy into somebody else's dreams, into the dreams of a massive corporation? And this is what people say when they talk about the rat race, because it is a rat race. It's like, working towards making someone else's dreams come true, usually a billionaire or a millionaire, because the person that owns the call centre that I'm referring to is like a billionaire, owns loads of them. 9-to-5s in general, I'm not going to judge anyone that chooses that, because obviously it's an extreme example. That's not everyone's reality, but I am saying that we should really, I believe, be encouraging people to be their own boss and take control of their own destiny, and that's what I am doing and what I intend to do for the rest of my life.
I think it's amazing how you've managed to make this jump to being self-employed and having your own business going on. I think that's so commendable. Do you think it is quite a struggle though to make that dream a reality, and especially financially?
Well, yeah, so as I said, I had to be really resourceful. I had to ask favours from people. Money that I'd lent to people before that I hadn't asked for back, I had to say, can I have it back now? And there is help out there, there's you can get help from your local council. And I got help from a local council with my council tax, for example, while I wasn't sure how I was going to pay for it.
So you're the kind of person who could definitely you could quit a job without a backup. You don't have that.
I've done it twice now.
See, I feel like I'm probably way more cautious than you, but I think that might be the slight difference of me being more millennial and having that whole, so I grew up with that whole hustle, girl boss, slay, make the money, climb the ladder, live your dreams, whatever. But yeah, so I feel like I've always had that fear of oh God, I've got to have something, I've got to have the backup, I've got to have that kind of 9-to-5 safety net. Yeah. So that, because I think for me, the fear of just having nothing, even though realistically I don't think I wouldn't be out on the streets or anything like that, heaven forbid. But I think for me personally, and I think probably a lot more people of my generation, they just have that fear of, if I did lose this, what would I do? That kind of older generation, like my parents and family, and if I was to tell them, oh, I've quit my job because I want to do presenting, or I want to do social media, they'd probably be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, but I'd prefer to be here than forced into an office sending me crazy.
Would you say that you're fully in support of working from home then?
I'm 100% in support of working from home. I can't imagine having to be forced to go and pretend to be the same all the time. Because for women as well, this is a really good point. For women, we are very up, down, energy levels, everything.
So you wouldn't agree with the fact that working from home is a privilege that should be earned? You think it should be as normal, as standard?
I think it should be normal, yeah. I think it should be encouraged. If you absolutely need to be in an office, which really you don't for a lot of jobs, then okay. But if you don't need to be there and you'd prefer to be in the sanctuary of your own home, in your own space, having more control over your day, then I don't see why not.
There's a lot of articles out there in the press about managers saying, oh, you know, like I can't work with Gen Z, like all my employees, they're not prepared, they don't show up to work, like they don't know how to dress for interviews, they don't turn up, or where do you think that comes from?
I think that a lot of people just don't want to be part of the game anymore. And you know what, maybe it is laziness, but laziness is a symptom of just not feeling inspired. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we need to inspire people.
If we have this whole generation now where the majority of people don't want to play the game, they don't want to be in the rat race, what do you think the future looks like if people aren't going into 9-to-5 jobs, if they're not going into the kind of common workplace? Where does that leave us?
I think it's going to lead to a time where art and creativity and service to others, that's going to be the big money maker. I truly, truly believe it. Art, creativity, people expressing themselves, authenticity, helping others, that is going to be the money maker. The time of greed, of selfishness, of forcing people to trade their time and energy to fill the pockets of a corporation, I truly believe those days are really numbered.
And obviously you work in social media now. I feel like there are a lot of people out there that would say that social media has sort of changed the way Gen Z think about work, and it kind of means they don't really, they have a different relationship with work now because of what they've seen on social media, and it's a bit pie in the sky maybe.
On the one hand, it can create a bit of pressure and it can encourage materialism and, you know, this whole idea that if they've got rich off that, then I'll get rich off that. But I don't think that's a problem with social media. I think that's a problem of people not understanding that someone else's path might look brilliant, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's yours. And that's a very key distinction that needs to be made. But all in all, I think social media is amazing.
So in terms of your future personally, what does that look like for you?
Well, I want to keep going with the social media, but I also want to focus on like growing my own personal brand online, and I want to really focus on helping people feel safe enough to be authentic through sharing my experiences and sharing my voice. And yeah, that's what I plan to do. Not exactly sure solidly how that's going to look, but I guess that's the beauty of it, not knowing exactly where you're going, but just knowing that there's somewhere better than where you were before.
My conversation with Dominique just now was really good. I feel like that was really positive. It just goes to show that Gen Z aren't all just, you know, lazy. I think a lot of Gen Z are actual real self-starters and really want to make things happen for themselves, which I really admire. Could I do it myself personally? Not sure. I feel like I'm very much of that generation that needs a safety net, but I really admire the way she was able to just pick herself up out of that situation to say, no, I don't want this, and she just made it happen for herself. So I do really admire that.
Similarly to Dominique and many other Gen Zers, I create content for social media, and although social media provides me with a source of income, it's very unstable, and I'd never quit my 9-to-5 without a backup plan. However, for a lot of Gen Zers, it doesn't seem to be about the paycheck, and the landscape of employment and work culture is rapidly changing because of that. During my time making this film, I've been made aware of a clear generational divide in opinion, and in order to build a future that accommodates the stability valued by older generations and the freedom sought by younger ones, a common ground must be established, and employers also need to be willing to adapt to fit in with the rapidly changing landscape of work culture.